Hello everyone. So this is second ARC, Ethics in Governance, and in this particular topic or in this particular video, I will be covering Preface and Chapter 1. And Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 are very large, so I will be completing them. Also, I will be completing the whole ARC, but you have to be patient with me. Okay, so let's start. Okay, now the thing is, what are the things which are covered in the preface? Preface is the introductory portion. Chapter 1 is also the introductory portion. So you can say the preface is the introductory of the introductory portion, and there also they have covered everything, very important things. In fact, when you will start reading ethics and governance, then you will realize that each and every point which is given in second ARC is very important. So you have to understand, or you have to make a, mind, or you have to think what to leave and what to read. But even then, I have covered almost everything. So let's see how it goes. First of all, there are two main components of ethical governance. What are those two main components? The first component is rule of law and the second is absence of graft. Now, what is rule of law? Rule of law means ensuring or seeing whether crime is properly punished or not, whether we have an independent judiciary or not, what is the extent of tax evasion, what is the extent of black marketing. So these all comes under rule of law. That means, in simple words, whether law has been properly implemented or not. Now, what is absence of graft? What is graft? Lalu Yadav. Just remember Lalu Yadav, you will remember graft. So, absence of graft means eliminating corruption among bureaucrats, eliminating corruption among political executive, eliminating corruption among legislature, as well as eliminating corruption among judiciary. So, absence of graft is related to corruption, elimination of corruption. Now, see, the thing is, generally what happens? Generally, the phenomena is corruption is an exception rather than a norm. But in our country, corruption is a norm rather than an exception. Okay. Now, the thing is, there are two faces of corruption. What are those two faces of corruption? First is corrupt institution and second is corrupt individuals, right? So, the thing is, only law cannot mandate honesty. Personal should be inherently ethical. If you are ethical in yourself, right, then all these things will take care of itself, right? So moral virtuousness is a foundation of GG. What is GG? Good governance. So you need to have a moral virtue, right? So ultimately everything comes down to ethics, right? So the thing is, there's a very famous saying of Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world, right? So in the ultimate analysis, it is a question of ethics. Now, what is ethics, right? So ethics is a set of standards that helps guide conduct. Now there was a question which was, I guess, asked in previous year UPSC, right? It was asked. So they have asked what is the difference between ethics and law, right? So ethics guide our internal conduct, whereas law guide our external conduct, right? Fine. So ethic is a set of standards that helps guide conduct. Present codes of conduct, not direct and to the point. See, we have code of conduct and code of ethics, right? We will talk about the difference between code of conduct and code of ethics. In fact, I can tell you one line difference right now only. What is the difference between code of ethics and code of conduct? Code of ethics is expected to be followed, whereas code of conduct is mandatory. You have to follow it. If you don't follow code of conduct, there will be certain kind of punishment which will be levied on or imposed on you. But code of ethics is expected to be followed, right? That is what is desired from you, right? Whether you fulfill it or not, it's fine. You will not be punished for that. So the thing is, ethics is a set of standard, but ethics is a set of standard that helps guide conduct, right? But the present codes of conducts are not direct and to the point. Ambiguity is there in codes of conduct also. Only these codes of conduct are vague sermons and they rarely indicate prohibition directly, right? Even the codes, when you will go to chapter 2, you will read about codes of conducts of ministers. So there you will see lots of codes of conducts are there for ministers both at central as well as state level, but they are very vague. They don't indicate prohibitions directly, right? Now the thing is, there was a very famous Napoleon quote which has been written in second ARC where he has simply said that, I'm just simplifying it for you, you can see the quote directly from second ARC. So he has said, law should be such that it should be even, even a simple peasant should understand what a law is, right? And keep it in his pocket, right? Or keep it in his coat. So it should be so simple that even a simple peasant can understand it. So that is the whole thing. But our code of conduct are not like that, right? Okay. Now the thing is, standard for probity in public life should be not only conviction in a criminal code, but propriety as determined by suitable independent institution. What does it mean? See, I will again reiterate this line. So they are saying that it shouldn't be like you are a criminal or you have done something wrong only when you are convicted by a criminal code. There are different independent institutions also. Right now, NHRC, CBC, CIC, there are different independent institutions, parliamentary committees. So the thing is, propriety should not only be determined by these criminal codes, they can be determined by suitable independent institutions also. And what is the example for it? The example is 1951 Mudgal case. And who was Mudgal? He was an MP of Lok Sabha who was expelled by parliament because it was believed that he has gained some monetary benefits or something like that. So he was expelled. So this was a classical case, or one of the best examples, what do you say, of upholding or upholding, what do you say, what is the word for it? I'm not getting the word. Where the ethics were upheld to the highest levels, right? But now we are not seeing that kind of an example, right? So wherever these kind of things come, where they talks about probity in public life, do give an example of 1951 Mudgal case, right? It's the highest example. It's one of the best examples, and it is given in second ARC also. Okay. Now the thing is, what is the thing? What is happening? Why corruption has become a norm rather than an exception in our country? Why? The thing is, we'll talk about it. See, the thing is, there's a need for changing procedures, rules, laws, which breed corruption and makes corruption a high return, low risk activity, right? Now, the thing is, here e-governance will play a very great role. Why? Because e-governance leaves a trail, right? Which you can always audit, right? Which different auditing mechanisms can always audit. So we need to focus on e-governance, as it will make it easy for people to do good and difficult to do evil, right? So this was all about the preface portion. Now we move on to the chapter 1, right? And what are the things which are there in chapter 1? Now here we'll try to understand the relationship between corruption and ethics. What are the approaches of dealing with corruption, and what are values and institution, and what separates values and institutions. There were different philosophers like Kautilya. So whether Kautilya focused on values or whether he focused on institutions, we'll talk about all these things. So let's start. So first of all, what is ethics? Ethics is a set of standards. We have read about it. Ethics is a set of standards that society places on itself and which helps guide behavior, choices and actions. But what is corruption? Corruption is an important manifestation of failure of ethics. So you can say that corruption and ethics, they lie at the opposite end of the spectrum, right? If your ethics is failing you, or if you're failing your ethics, so you are indulgent some kind of a corruption, right? So corruption is a manifestation of failure of ethics. Now again, there are two approaches of dealing with corruption and abuse of office, right? What are those two approaches? First approach is overemphasis on values and character, and which stress that the declining values cause rise in corruption. So first approach of dealing with corruption is when you are stressing more on your values and you say that declining values are causing rise in corruption. Now the thing is, in that case, in that particular approach, you say that only way to fight corruption is restoration of values. Fine. So here you are placing more importance on values. Fine. So this is the first approach. What is the second approach? The second approach is, it is a belief that people are inherently socially conscious, but there are some who are defiant and they are pursuing personal gain at the cost of public. So these defiant behavior has to be dealt firmly, right? So this is a concept, if you have read about philosophy, or if you are in history optional or philosophy optional, you must have read about Locke and Rousseau, right? So they are saying man are inherently good. Similarly, Hobbes said man are inherently bad. So similarly, the second approach is somewhat, what do you say, similar to that. This is not the saying of ARC. This is my personal opinion. When I read this particular point from ARC, I realized that it was somewhat similar to the concept of Locke or Rousseau, where they said that man are inherently good. Similarly, this particular approach is saying that people are inherently socially conscious, but there are some who are bad and they have to be dealt firmly. So this is the second approach. Now let's talk about values and institutions, and let's understand the difference between values and institutions. So what are values? Values are a sense of right and wrong, and it is intrinsic to our culture, but it needs institutional support so that it can spread far and wide, right? Now what are institutions? Institutions are something which give shape, content and incentives to values, right? Now let's talk about Labasna, LBS, So Labasna, when you will go to Labasna, it will give shape to your civic values, right? So that you could become a, very enlightened civil servant, right? So that is the whole thing. Similarly, you have to understand that most of the philosophers, scholars, religions focus more on values rather than institution, but Kautilya focused more on institutions rather than values, right? He talked about what should be the duty of a king, what should be the duty of a soldier, how king should behave and all those. So it was about institution, the institution of king. So again, Kautilya focused more on institutions rather than values, but most scholars focus on values, but both are equally important and they complement each other, right? Okay. Now let's talk about factors which aggravate corruption and abuse of office. There are three factors which has been mentioned by or which have been mentioned by, or which whatever, it has been mentioned by second ARC. What are those three factors? The first factor is arbitrary exercise of power. Second is enormous asymmetry of power. Third is government policies. We'll see how these three factors aggravate corruption. So arbitrary exercise of power, which is a colonial legacy. So ours is a society which worships power. So that's why for some people, civil service is not a service, but it is a way of attaining power. Right? I hope we people are not like that. You people are not like that. Don't go to the service for attaining means power, right? Go for doing service, right? Fine. Now, the second factor is enormous asymmetry of power in our society. Why there is an enormous asymmetry of power? Because 90% work in unorganized sector, and out of 10% who works in organized sector, 70% are employed by government, right? So overall, you can say 7% are employed by government. Now these 7% people who are even the lowliest of the public servants are better off than most people in the country, right? So what has happened? There are 7% people who are better than 93% of the people, right, of the other spectrum, right? So this is creating a power asymmetry, and such power asymmetry reduces societal pressure to conform to ethical behavior, right? So that is the whole thing. Power asymmetry: 90% in unorganized sector, 10% in 10% in organized sector, and even in that 10%, 70% are there in government sector. So because of all these things, asymmetry of power is there. So that's why people are not adhering to ethical behavior. And the third factor which is aggravating corruption is government policies. What are those government policies and what is happening? See, government policies include overregulation, access, state control, etc. Now, state subsidies and welfare program in a society with asymmetry of power. We have seen why we have an asymmetry, right? So state subsidies and welfare program in a society with asymmetry of power converts public servant into a patron and master. So we become too much dependent on them, and it makes them feel like a patron and master. So again, that's why government policy also breeds corruption. Okay. Now, thing is, experience of past 6 decades. Why they have said 6 decades when we have completed 70 years? See, this second ARC was formed in 2005, and they have given this fourth report. This was the fourth report, and they have given this fourth report in 2007. So for them, it was past 6 decades. So experience of past 6 decades tells us that competition, transparency, and technology decreases corruption, whereas over centralization increases it. So you have to remember this. These three things, these three facets: competition, transparency, and technology, it decreases corruption, whereas over centralization increases it. Now the thing is, there are large number of intermediaries between final decision makers and public, and it makes accountability diffuse. You don't know who is accountable for a particular action, right? So that's why this increases temptation to abuse authority. So what are the ways in which we can empower citizens so that accountability could be fixed, right? So empowerment of citizens needed to make authorities accountable. And what are the ways? RTI is a way, citizens charter is a way, social auditing is a way. Now what is social auditing? See, social auditing bridges gap between vision and reality of an organization, right? Social auditing means you go to an organization, suppose you are an officer, and you do a social audit. So you say that, yeah, these are the areas where your employers are not satisfied and all those things, or where you have not fulfilled a reservation criteria and all those things. So what you're focusing on the social aspect of an organization, and thereby you're trying to reduce the gap between vision and reality of an organization. These are all jibber jabber, but you have to write it. Okay. The thing is, so this was about empowerment of citizens. The thing is, enforcement of rule of law and deterrent punishment against corruption are critical to build a ethnically sound society. But the thing is, most important determinant of integrity of society is the quality of politics and integrity of politicians. What kind of politicians we are producing and what kind of politics they are pursuing, that will determine the integrity of our society. The thing is, what politics need to do? Politics need to attract and reward men and women of integrity, competence, and passion for public good, right? The thing is, second ARC states that there is a vicious cycle of corruption which is operating, and citizens often end up losing much more by resisting corruption. So what happens now? There is a vicious cycle. So if you start resisting corruption, you will start suffering more. So what people do? They start supporting corruption because they feel like if they don't support corruption, then they will face lots and lots of more situations, right? Which they don't want to, right? Lots of situations I have faced in my life where I realized that, dude, what am I doing? What is happening with my life, right? And you must have, everybody faces it, right? So it is a vicious cycle of corruption, right? And there again comes the two other concepts of corruption, which is coercive corruption, which is also called extortionary corruption, and second is collusive corruption, where bribe giver and taker are colludes and both benefit from corruption. So what is happening as the economy is getting freed from state control after LPG reforms? So extortionary corruption is decreasing and collusive corruption is increasing. So you have to say that in this period after 1991, collusive corruption has increased and extortionary corruption has decreased. Now what are the anti-corruption initiatives? We'll talk about now anti-corruption initiatives. So what are the anti-corruption initiatives? So first of all, lots of anti-corruption initiatives have been taken and they have been successful to a varied extent, right? So the first anti-corruption initiative is disclosure of wealth, educational qualification and criminal records of politicians, right? Second ARC has used a specific term antecedents. Instead of criminal records, they have used criminal antecedents. So you can use that word. I have used record because antecedent was somewhat new to me. Antecedent consequent I have read in maths, but yeah, it was new to me. Okay, I'm deviating. So again, anti-corruption initiative first is disclosure of wealth, educational qualification, criminal records. Second is RTI. So RTI is playing a greater role in anti-corruption initiative. Third is e-governance. E-governance is very, very, very important. Now the thing is, second ARC has also talked about whistleblower law to protect informants. Now the thing is, this particular whistleblower thing I have covered, I think in August or in July of GS paper 2. There was a news that whistleblower government has not operationalized the Whistleblower Act, and they have even proposed an amendment which neutralizes the what do you say? Earlier they were excluded from Official Secrets Act, right? All these whistleblowers, but now the amendment is trying to remove that particular immunity which was provided to them, right? The word is immunity. So that is the whole thing which is going on. Second ARC has talked about whistleblower law and it's still not been implemented. It has been passed, but it has not yet been operationalized. Now the thing is, what are the focus areas of second ARC, right, pertaining to ethics and governance? So there are three specific areas where second ARC is focusing. First is vigilance and corruption. What does it mean? So they are talking about, first thing, they are talking about way of addressing proactive vigilance and addressing systematic or systemic deficiencies. They want to be proactive. Vigilance, this kind of thing should be proactive rather than reactive. And they want to address the deficiencies which is there in the system, right? So this is about vigilance and corruption, right? Now what is the second point, or what is the second focus area of ARC? That is relationship between political executive and permanent civil service. So there's always a accusation and counter accusation games which goes on. So there's a way, second ARC are talking about different ways to ensure harmonious relationship. We'll talk about them in different chapters. Third focus area of ARC is code of conduct for different organs, right? Political, executive, civil services. What should be the different code of conduct? Again, we'll talk about code of conduct for ministers and all those legislature in second chapter only. So this was about preface and chapter 1, and then I will again start chapter 2 and chapter 3. Chapter 2 and chapter 3 are appreciably long, very long, but again I will cover it. I will cover everything, but again you have to be patient with me because it is taking too much time. I'm completing notes and I'm doing everything on my own. Okay, thank you.